Emergent storylines is a phrase used quite often by Arrowhead Studios. It's right up there just behind fantasy. Arrowhead uses this term in reference to the Galactic War in Helldivers 2. More specifically, the events that were not planned by the developers, but rather happened organically as a result of the actions of the game's community. Some notable examples of emergent storylines that have taken place over the game's lifespan are events like the Battle of Malevelon Creek. And that's it. There haven't really been any other community-guided events, actually. That's because as much as Arrowhead likes the idea of emergent storylines, they don't really want them to happen. They have their own ideas for the Galactic War and content they've been working on for years that they want to release in tandem with specific events and story beats. If Arrowhead spent the last several months developing cave missions and hive worlds, meanwhile the player base was making a beeline for Cyberstan, that could be an issue. Especially if the players were allowed to reach Cyberstan only to find that Arrowhead hadn't finished their Automaton homeworld content yet. With the way the Galactic War within Helldivers 2 is set up, it makes sense they'd really limit what players can do of their own volition. That being said, it's a shame they decided to set things up this way in the first place. If the Galactic War were allowed to end and planets didn't have to be made off limits while special content is being cooked up behind the scenes, players could have way more agency. But it's a little late for that. Or is it? Maybe there's a way for developers and players to meet in the middle, with Arrowhead being able to tell the story and release content in the way they have in mind, while players are given more agency to engage with the Galactic War in the ways they want to. I think this could be accomplished through the introduction of a player-made campaign system. These custom campaigns could be created by anyone and be joined by anyone. They'd exist alongside the primary campaign and its major orders, but it would consist of its own separate objectives. When a player joins one of these custom campaigns, they are shown information about that campaign's goals and progress alongside the main campaign and its major orders. Joining a campaign would be a way to coordinate with other players who share similar goals in the game. It would be a bit like joining a clan, only instead of a permanent club you're a part of, the campaign would be a temporary event. Maybe once a player reaches a certain level, they unlock the ability to create their own custom campaigns. To create a campaign, a player would have to select a target planet and pay a large amount of some in-game currency, either requisition slips or samples. The goal of the campaign would then be to liberate the target planet. Once the liberation campaign is created, a week-long timer will begin counting down. 1 week likely won't be enough time for a campaign to liberate its target planet, especially if that target planet has 3 other planets between it and the nearest liberated planet. Also, let's be real here. Arrowhead probably doesn't want players to make that much progress in the Galactic War without it being part of their narrative. This idea of player-made campaigns needs to coexist with Arrowhead's vision for the narrative of Helldivers 2. For that reason, I've come up with the idea of campaign milestones. A campaign milestone would be a smaller, more achievable goal than liberating the target planet. This milestone would have to be met by the end of the week-long timer, otherwise the campaign would end in a loss. If the milestone is met, however, the week-long timer would be reset and a new, slightly more challenging milestone would be set for the campaign's participants to complete. This cycle can continue indefinitely as long as the milestone is met each week or until the target planet is liberated. To explain this idea further, I need to explain a bit of how planet liberation works in the game currently. Each planet has health, typically at least 1 million health, but this can vary a lot. When missions are completed, they damage that planet's health by however many liberation points you're awarded by completing that mission or operation. This is counteracted by something called decay, which is basically constant planet health regen. The rate of this decay is represented in-game as the enemy resistance percentage, which can range from as low as 0.2% up to 5%. Campaign milestones would be some amount of liberation points or planet health derived from the total planet health of every planet on the way to the campaign's target planet. For example, if the target planet of a campaign is planet C, but there are still planets A and B that need to be liberated before planet C can, then the health of all 3 of those planets would be combined. Let's just say the total health of planets A, B, and C is 5 million. The campaign milestone would be some fraction of this, maybe 10% or 500,000 liberation points gathered by players who joined that campaign completing missions on those planets. In other words, some achievable amount of participation in the campaign relative to the ambitiousness of the campaign. Something I want to point out is that these campaign milestones aren't directly linked to the liberation of planets. They don't take into account planet decay rates or even the total health of a given planet. This is intentional. It means campaigns don't necessarily have to make any actual progress in the Galactic War in order to continue. Rather, all the milestones really call for is a certain amount of missions to be completed. Player-made campaigns certainly can expedite the liberation of planets, but if Arrowhead really doesn't want the players to make too much progress in any given region of the galaxy, they can just crank up the decay rates or increase planet health without affecting any campaign's current milestone. You may be wondering, what's the point of a campaign if you can never achieve its goal? For one, campaigns can go on indefinitely with enough player support and tenacity. If Arrowhead really doesn't want players to reach certain planets, that just means that campaigns targeting those certain planets need to persist until Arrowhead finally does allow them to be accessed. I know what you're thinking. That still doesn't sound fun at all and doesn't give players any real agency. And to that I'd say you're absolutely right. That's why I've come up with some other ideas to keep campaigns engaging regardless of the actual progress they're making on the galactic map. It's time to talk about what benefits these player-made campaigns would provide, starting with a campaign donation feature. Players could donate samples to the campaign they are currently a part of in order to help move the campaign towards its ultimate goal. This could take the form of a weekly rotation of perks to be provided to players diving on behalf of a campaign, such as shorter cooldowns for certain stratagems, additional charges of a specific stratagem, boosters provided on top of the ones players choose, etc. Players would vote for which perk they want by donating samples to that option. Basically, just imagine how the DSS would work if it was actually cool. These perks could be permanent for the duration of the campaign, allowing long campaigns to accumulate lots of fun perks and making it all the more impactful when they come to an end or a milestone isn't met. It would actually feel like the Galactic War had real stakes if the campaign you've been invested in for 3 weeks and accumulated multiple cool perks in was at risk of failing. Another thing these campaigns could have is campaign modifiers. These would be sort of the opposite of the sample donation perks, and instead be modifiers that get applied to every mission played on behalf of a certain campaign. These modifiers could be things like decreased reinforcement budget, shorter mission clock, enemy surges, and maybe even less stratagem slots. These modifiers would be selected by the host of the campaign, and each one would add to a liberation multiplier that increases the liberation points awarded from each mission completed. In other words, campaign modifiers would make missions more challenging but increase the reward for each mission completed. Campaign modifier slots are something that could be earned as a campaign goes on, similarly to the perks I mentioned a moment ago. When a campaign begins, maybe there's only one modifier slot, but an additional modifier slot is awarded each time a campaign milestone is met. This would serve to increase both the challenge and reward of campaigns as they go on for longer and longer. Players would be incentivized to apply these modifiers to their campaigns because without the liberation point multipliers that come with campaign modifiers, the constantly increasing campaign milestones would become harder to meet. Like I stated earlier, Arrowhead doesn't want to give players much agency in regards to the Galactic War, because that opens up the potential for player actions to conflict with their plans for the game. That's why this idea of player-made campaigns is focused more on prolonging a campaign through meeting relatively small milestones, rather than having a massive impact on the state of the war. Accumulating liberation points in order to meet milestones doesn't take into account decay rates or total planet health, meaning the prolonging of a campaign isn't directly tied to liberating planets, meaning campaigns don't need to liberate planets. They hopefully would, but they don't need to. If Joel decides players are having too much success on a certain planet, he can simply increase the planet's health or the decay rate to negate any player progress. Arrowhead pulls that kind of stuff pretty frequently as is. If players create a campaign to liberate Cyberstan, and that campaign attracts tons of players, they still probably won't achieve that campaign's goal, but they can at least get weeks of fun through campaign boosters and modifiers. The thing that holds player attention at that point isn't so much capturing the target planet, but prolonging the campaign with all the fun effects. If we do run into a situation where a campaign has picked up a ton of steam and loads of players are all fighting on the same planet on behalf of the same campaign, isn't that the kind of emergent storytelling that Arrowhead wants? And if they do decide to change some numbers behind the scenes and make that planet nearly impossible to liberate, then boom, you have Malevelon Creek all over again. The players forging their own path in spite of insurmountable odds for their own cause, not one that was given to them by the developers. These player-made campaigns could coexist with the main campaign. The main campaign would be the baseline experience, steady and reliable. Players would undoubtedly flock to this main campaign whenever new content is introduced and during major events, such as the recent Gloom expedition to Oshaune, or the invasion of Super-Earth. Meanwhile, the player campaigns are custom experiences, chaotic and often short-lived. They'd provide endless entertainment during the weeks or months where new content is in short supply. Giving players this much control would allow player-made campaigns to fill the role of both clans and custom matches, two features that players have been wanting to see in this game since launch. You want to play a game with certain modifiers? Join a campaign with the features that you're looking for. Player-made campaigns would also fit into the universe of Helldivers, give more agency to players, and give players an actual reason to care about what happens due to the potential of losing a beloved campaign. Helldivers 2 is a ton of fun, but it's a lot more fun when you have something to fight for, something that you have personal stake in, something that isn't guaranteed to you for the sake of telling a certain story, but rather is earned through real dedication. Anyways, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Have a good one.